Coming up on Theater Talk.
The extraordinary thing about this show is that we look at a certain time very fondly of a certain president. And now we're in a new reality.
A new time.
Even when this Hamilton first came out, it was a real celebration of the world that we're in, how modern the world is moving. And now, in the wake of what we are in now, it's a conversation about if you don't like where you are, go and change the world.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation and the Honorable Thomas Mercer Ray.
Patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties of sorrow. For the first time, I'm thinking past tomorrow.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins, and I am so delighted to welcome my extra special guest co-host, Julie Halston, star of Broadway, TV, and off-Broadway. And we are so delighted tonight. We are welcoming the new stars of Hamilton. We are joined by Bryan, Terrell, Clark, George Washington, Daniel Breaker, the tormented Aaron Burr, and Mandy Gonzalez, who's killing it, as they all, as Angelica Hamilton. Well, not Hamilton, Angelica Schuyler.
Yes.
You know, I went to high school with a boy named Philip Schuyler, who
really?
who was a descendant, and he
Wow.
said he's a college teacher, and he said that the development director keeps looking at him now.
That he does.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right, Julie.
Why don't you have more money,
why don't
Philip? That's what he keeps saying. Why don't you have more money to give to us?
Right.
You're a descendant of the Skylar's.
The man is loaded. Right.
Well, I have to say, first of all, I'm happy to be here, but second of all, I was so thrilled to see the show again, and with these magnificent, and I have to say, because I'm a jaded, actress, I was astounded once again by the show. It's a masterpiece. We know it's a masterpiece, but then you go back and you go, okay, well, is it really a masterpiece? Yeah. It really is. But let me ask you guys, when you came into the show, because you had seen the show, I imagine, what surprised you about the show that you hadn't thought of before, or that you found more daunting, that you maybe didn't realize was going to be a little more daunting than something else?
You know, I saw the show, and I'm really good friends with Leslie Odom Jr. and a few of the other cast members, and I saw the show for the first time, and I literally called my agents and said, do not submit me for this show.
Were you playing Marvin Gaye in Motown at that time?
I had just finished playing Marvin.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, I saw the show, and I just thought, if I go in to audition for this, I am going to literally make every choice that Leslie Odom Jr. made, and I won't be as good because I'll be doing a version of Leslie, so leave it alone. So then when they called and said, well, they want you to be seen for Washington, I went, let's go for it.
Okay.
And I love Chris, too, who's a phenomenal performer, and
Chris Jackson,
who we love. And he booked Bull, the TV show, and there was this opportunity to come and audition for the show. And the thing that surprised me was I had never been placed into a show before.
Okay.
You know what I mean.
I do.
It is so terrifying, especially a show like Hamilton, because it is such, everything is choreographed and directed within an inch of its life because it just moves. There's so many people, there's a turntable, and you're on stage the whole.
Oh yeah, there's not a margin for error.
There's not a margin for error.
No.
And so I learned it in a studio with, some resources and some help, but essentially you're in there with tape on the floor, learning Hamilton alone. It is terrifying.
That's daunting.
Who is directing you? Tommy Kail around, or is
Tommy Kail was around.
Yeah.
We have an amazing. That's another thing. I want to take time to thank all of our support system. We
Patrick
have great,
Dassel.
we have great associate directors and associate music directors that help us. So you're definitely not alone. And Tommy and Lackmore and Lynn have left us in good hands because their support team is phenomenal.
Yeah.
You started this show in Chicago.
Yes, yeah. I joined it in Chicago back in February. My experience was slightly different in that, like, in the rehearsal room, I was bored. I was like, let's just answer these questions on the stage. Something that was really extraordinary about this show in particular is that it is a perfectly made play, right? It's a well-made play, and it's quite intricate from viewing it, and even when you're on stage, it is also, the mechanism is brilliant, right? From the choreography to the set to the lighting, right? But somehow it is still loose and freeform, right? And that was a remarkable thing. I think that really goes to the creative team really wanting to celebrate the individual that takes on the role. This is the second time I've joined a company. I was on Book of Mormon for 3 years, and that was where I joined the company there. But this one really celebrates like your individual take on.
And I
on the
noticed
part.
blocking changes.
There are little changes like all the time. We meet every Tuesday before the show we call it the Constitutional Convention and the Con.
Yeah.
And we meet and we have notes from every team, and sometimes there's changes to music or to the dance, like little fine things.
Just little adjustments. That would be the associate choreographers, some of the dance captains. That's led by stage management, the MD.
Right.
Just stuff. I mean, it's a living, breathing
we
thing, right?
connect.
So it plays sort of two things beautifully. It's like you have 30 minutes to just check in, new announcements, who's leaving, who's pregnant,
coming
whose
in,
birthday,
right.
like that sort of checking in.
Right.
Usually I'm bringing food.
Dollar Wednesday.
Yeah.
Dollar Wednesday, Dollar Friday.
Right.
But what bored you in the rehearsal then before you got to the?
Well, I find that my access into any role is really relationships with the people on stage, and it was very hard for me to just like sit around and like look at tape and somebody say, well, a chair is going to fly this way. It's like, well, I need to know that. Let me know that when it actually happens. So we had 4 weeks of rehearsal, but it really sort of came down to just 2 weeks. Because it was just a matter of like, I want to get up there and do.
Yeah.
And that's also very different for Burr, because Burr is the puppeteer to a certain extent.
No, you're the center.
You're the narrator.
And all those questions are really answered in the doing.
Mandy, you bring an entirely different take to Angelica
Oh, thank you.
Schuyler. Did you think I'm going to do it differently, or did that just
No,
evolve?
I think that it just evolves. I think it's what Daniel said. Tommy Kail really leaves room for the individual to kind of come through. And I think that my take on Angelica and who I am right now and what I've been through in my life, it all plays within the character.
I thought what was so magnificent, because again, we're watching these new people bring life into this fantastic masterpiece. But I saw things I had not seen the first time. The first time, I think, I was so aware of the phenomenon. This time, I actually got the story, the play, the relationships were very different. I got the torture of Aaron Burr in a very different way. George Washington, I don't know, somehow you illuminated it in a different way for me as well. And the relationship between you and Hamilton has a different resonance.
Now, I do want to bring up one point. We talk about that we got to go back. That the one thing I feel terrible about Hamilton is it's not generally accessible to most people. Not only because it's SRO, it's going to be around for a very long time, people so that get there, but also it's so expensive. This is not your doing. But you were talking about how they are reaching out to student groups and to some degree trying to make it at least possible for some people who can't afford,
I think Lynn, I think that's a very...
Tell us about that.
No, I think that's a very important thing for Lynn and for the producers, that they want to reach out to the next generation to come and see this show that is about America, that's about our founding fathers and stuff that they're studying right now so that they can see themselves on stage.
You were telling me that the other day you did it for a group of kids.
It's called an Eduham.
Yeah, so what
and
goes on
it's
there?
11th graders from different New York City public schools. They come and they get to see a matinee, and it's a regular matinee. We're all there, and what the wonderful thing is that they have to write a piece before they come to the show, and if their piece gets selected, they get to go on stage. So they come at like 10 o'clock, and they perform for us and their peers, and so they have to also see what it's like to get up in front of people. Their peers have to be supportive. They have to learn what that's like to support one another.
The extraordinary thing about the EduHam is that it is, and these student matinees, is that it is the most sustainable form of outreach I've ever been a part of. I think a lot of times when schools, when theaters talk about, oh, we're going to do a student matinee, we're going to bring some kids out, it doesn't have a lasting effect. I mean, I know the endless amounts of Shakespeare plays that I've done with student matinees where they are just checked out, right? But what Lynn and his father have really believe in is sustainable development.
And Lynn's father's a politician.
Yes, yeah. But ultimately, in the long run, from a producer's point of view, you're making theater goers. You're keeping it alive, and it's a real thrill because the kids will tell you how they feel, and if they don't believe something, they will let you know that they don't believe it. But what's extraordinary, they're talking and they're raucous, and when people kiss, they're ooh, and when somebody dies, they're like ah. But they're engaged. They are fully engaged for 3 hours, and it's also extraordinary that the majority of kids in that audience could not afford these tickets.
No way.
But at one Wednesday every month, you have, per production, you have a bunch of public school kids that are seeing the show. My last EduHam in Chicago in May, all 3 productions were doing EduHams at the same time, so you had like 5,000
Oh,
kids
that's
that were
fantastic.
witnessing a history and also seeing people that are their complexion on stage.
I hosted one, and literally afterwards I was in my dressing room almost in tears because these are students who I believe they get free lunch at these schools. I believe they're Title I schools. And not only that, but I remembered seeing a performance in high school of a reverse race version of Othello. And it was the moment in high school when I went, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And to be engaged with these students who are not just watching the show, but many of them performing on the stage. And by the way, they're brilliant.
I bet.
I'm blown away about
And what kind of thing are they doing on the stage?
They're rapping,
Yeah.
they are singing, all of these pieces they have written themselves.
At dawn, the streets of Boston were on fire.
Dancing.
They're dancing, their skits.
You know, Oscar Eustace did talk about the fact that he looks at Lynn as our Shakespeare. And I don't think he is wrong because, as we see, he took the vernacular of the way people are talking, communicating, rapping, creating, and giving it to the public. It's almost as if it's the globe.
Yes.
And you have different sections or whatever, but people are reacting in real time to this story.
Yeah.
And it's our story, but it has to do with the past, so it's almost like a Shakespearean
It's a history.
historical.
Also, I think that because it's so Shakespearean, that is what attributes to this idea of being able to see the show multiple times with different people playing the roles. I mean, we've all seen Hamlet. We love Hamlet. We know what the story is. But the reason you go see Hamlet now is because you want to see that actor's take.
Now, you were telling us a great story about when you first came into the show. Please tell us that story.
My first night in this life-changing experience of a show.
After you passed the audition.
After I passed the 7 auditions.
7 auditions.
7 auditions.
Well, so those of you out there who want to do this Broadway thing, I mean, we know.
Yes.
Buckle up. Let's talk about the audition experience. Okay, so here's the thing. I went through maybe 2 rounds of auditions, but each round has stopping points. So you go in, the first time I went in was probably a version of a pre-screen with casting. And then you get in with the creatives, and then if the creatives like you, then you usually go to a work session that's really getting you ready for producers.
Oh, yes.
And then you walk into a room with these creatives that you've connected with and a wall of suits behind them. And I went through that experience, I would say, the first time, and then Chris didn't leave the show. So I wasn't sure all of the details, but I knew that he was still in it, and so there was no space to be occupied. I knew that they were auditioning for the coming tour, which was Chicago, and then the tour that went right after, which was Angelica. I didn't know the second time what I was auditioning for. Am I being asked to go on the road? Is this for Broadway?
Right.
And so I went through another round of auditions, which was about 3 this time. And I had a midlife crisis actor breakdown moment right before my last audition. My managers called me, and I was on my way to do some writing in LA. And they said, hey, I know you're getting on a flight tomorrow.
Oh,
at
it's always
6 a.m.
tomorrow.
It's always.
It's always
It's
within
so-
24 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, when do you want me to come in? Right, you want me to change my
Yeah.
flight? That's in a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
So they said, well, we really want you to stay because Hamilton wants to see you again. And I lost my mind. I was in these Harlem streets losing it. I literally was like, they want to see me again. They've seen me so many times.
Yeah.
What else am I going to do different in the room?
Am I juggling?
What am I doing? Am I doing it on my head?
Circus act?
They were like, well, no, this time it's for producers. I was like, but the producers saw me last time, I think. I don't know. So I was losing it. And my manager just laughed at me. She goes, I got a good feeling about this. Postpone the flight. And yeah, crazy. And at the time, I was that actor in between gigs. And so I didn't have the money to just book another flight. So it was also the day we voted. I think that was the day. Yeah, it was the day a
lot of
last
different
election.
things coming together.
Yeah. So it was an emotional day. We were waiting to see, what the results would be. And I was being asked to stay longer. And I was just a wreck. And I took a shower and boohoo cried. By the way, I think that every adult should have one moment a year where you just have the ugly cry. It helps. It'll cleanse your spirit.
So I've heard.
You can think clearly and go and book your, Broadway show. So I had the ugly cry. And I got out of the shower, and my friend Jamie calls me, and she goes, hey, Bryan. And I said, hey, what's up? And she had the ugly cry. Oh. I said, well, what is happening? And she goes, I'm graduating from flight school. She had this big midlife crisis and quit her job and became a flight attendant. It was like a moment. And she goes, my family can't make it to my graduation. And I'm going to be down here alone. But this is more than just the job for me. This is like me starting over. And I really just wish someone could be there. And I said, well, I'm supposed to go to LA tomorrow and they want me to stay for this thing. And she goes, oh, you're my flight companion. And I went, what? She goes, you can fly to LA, do what you need to do, fly back for your audition, fly down here and be with me for my graduation, and then fly back and you can do all of that for free.
Okay.
Here's what's funny about
I want to know Jamie's number. I know Jamie's
Now,
number.
here's what's crazy. Maybe she got that job just so that I can get Hamilton because she no longer works for that airline anymore. She's not a flight attendant anymore.
It was a higher power. But before we run out of time, then the election happened.
The election happened.
Yes, it did.
I get the job.
Yes.
And then my first day on the stage performing as George Washington, I get emotional thinking about it now, was Barack Obama's last speech in Chicago. And there's this moment where I'm walking downstage singing One Last Time right before we get to what I now call the gospel ending. And and I looked out in the audience and people started weeping. And I think we had a collective moment because I think we all realized at that moment that this was the last time that we would really be hearing from Barack Obama as president. This was his one last time speech. And to be playing George Washington, whose idea it was to only do 2 terms, knowing that our president was going to be stepping down from his term, it was an emotional moment that I will never forget. I don't care what happens in my career after this. It was a serendipitous moment that was
People stood up.
Thoughts on the most meaningful moments for you? Do you have one?
Quick off of this, I mean, the extraordinary thing about this show is that we look at a certain time very fondly of a certain president, and now we're in a new reality.
A new time.
But what's extraordinary about being a part of the show is that it survives time. Like Hamilton is passing through time. Maybe when this Hamilton first came out, it was a real celebration of the world that we're in. This and how modern the world is moving. And now in the wake of what we are in now, it's a conversation about if you don't like where you are, go and change the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
It gives us hope.
It also gives us context of yes, this is the same thing was happening in Hamilton's times, where people were wild with polarizing anger.
It can't get worse than this,
Yeah,
or
and
It can't get more exciting.
Exactly.
But history does repeat itself in a very interesting way.
Hamilton was a Federalist. I mean,
Yeah.
he had some beliefs that, actually, if you analyze them, you'd go, oh, I don't know about that. But
Now, in terms of what this show means to me is really what it means to my children. My 9-year-old couldn't really see Book of Mormon. That wasn't really
Why not? Come on.
And of course, what this show means for me as an artist is an extraordinary thing. But really, what it is to see my son Rory, who is 9 now, who is mixed race and is dealing with all of the developments that come with that age and identity and being of two cultures, and to see him in the audience see this sea of black and brown on stage means it means quite a bit. It's a very important thing to be a part of, and it makes me very proud to be a father, it makes me very proud to be playing a complex role as a black male. I'm not quite often given the opportunity to. It is a joy to come to work. I mean, like getting off the train and seeing the sun setting and walking around the street.
Mandy, you knock off that You do the incredible number "Satisfied."
Yes.
And which is, I mean, I read Jeremy McCarter's book on how that song was constructed. I recommend that book highly, you know, and how that song was constructed. And you were in the Heights in a very important role. But how much work on yourself did you have to do to be able to master that very complex song structure?
I think the wonderful thing about that song is that it does the work for you. It's such a masterpiece, and it's like a play within a play.
But still, you have a lot of stuff you have to be doing.
Yeah. When I first saw the show at the Public, I was like, oh, I love this, and how can I be a part of it? Because I know Lynn and the creative team so well, when Lynn was putting together his concert at Lincoln Center, the Hamilton mixtape concert, his songbook series, he wanted to do like 6 songs from Hamilton. And so he had called me to come and sing, which now became Mariah Reynolds. I think it was Mariah Reynolds' song, but it was just songs in the concert form. And so to see Satisfied didn't exist yet, and to see all of these songs that he had been working on for all that time during In the Heights and then in between In the Heights, and to see how far it had come at the Public, it was like mind-blowing. And so when the soundtrack came out, I bought it, and I was doing a lot of concerts at the time, so I was traveling a lot, and I don't like to fly, so I would put on Hamilton whenever like turbulence happened, which is like every flight, and I would try to learn Satisfied, like just putting it out there. I want to learn this song. And then when Tommy called me and offered me the job, and I went in for my first rehearsal, I was lucky because Karen Olivo, who played it and who's a really good friend of mine, and played it in Chicago. Yeah, she had to go and do a concert out of town, and so Tommy Kail called and said, do you want to come and rehearse with the Chicago company before they go? So I really got the whole experience of like working with a company.
And you didn't even have to go through the auditions that this guy did.
I didn't. I went through a lot with that creative team beforehand, a lot of different auditions. So
you paid your dues.
I paid my dues, and they since have become incredible supporters of mine. And so when he called me, it was like so many things. Like you remembered me, and you know, so how hard I had been working up to that point just to get back on the boards after having my child. So I felt completely just honored to be a part of it. But I learned Satisfied in the plane. I got to rehearsal, and I realized I was saying a lot of the words wrong. Because I learned the rap just from like listening to it. I didn't read anything.
Who knew, right?
But who knew? And the great thing is that I was able to work with Alex during the rehearsal. So he was like, it's actually, you're not saying that, you're saying this. And then it became, oh, this is what she's saying, and this is what it means. And so I think having that was so wonderful, but the storytelling is there. And to master that language was difficult, but everything else was easy. You know, because I don't have to think about the notes. I don't have to think about any of that because the storytelling is so
strong.
So vivid.
We have 1 minute left. A final thought?
Well, I would love to know, Mandy, has Angelica inspired you? Because she's pretty inspiring.
She is, you know.
She's an upstanding woman.
You know, when I was doing research for Angelica, I saw a painting of her. And in that painting, she's trying to look at the artist, but at the same time, she has her child that the woman that's watching her child is trying to hand her. So she's trying to get her child, but also looking at the artist. And so I think that there's something that I learned just from that, and it's that she wanted to have a voice, and she wanted to have her duty and her family, but she also had vision and had this goal
out there.
Yes, and so I think that for me, she was fearless, and so I've tried to kind of incorporate that within my own life as a mother and as a working mom, to not feel, to know that there's been other women before me that have come and had to strive and work a lot harder. So I'm just going to keep pushing, and so for me, that inspired me.
Well, the new stars of Hamilton, we are so delighted to see you here. Daniel Breaker, Mandy Gonzalez, and Bryan Terrell Clark. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Hamilton, the new generation. It's Hamilton, the new generation. And thank you so much.
Oh, I had so much
Julie
fun.
Halston.
It was fantastic being
My
here.
dear,
Magnificent
my dear.
people.
All right, so
I love them.
we'll see you next time on Theater Talk.
Sean Chapman!
All right. My name is Sean. I'm wearing purple to represent my school, Impact. And I'm going to do a rap about the revolution. So let's get it. Yo, King George, I got something to say. Y'all ready to pay? Because we're the USA. Former British territory, freedom making our own history. Finally, we are liberated. Pesky Brits exacerbated. Going back at all our woes, don't forget our black heroes. Part of G-Dub's ragtag army, setting scenes is my specialty. Let's go there. Back up Georgia, old news. If you're feeling sad, cry to your booze. We now own this nation, fueled by irritation, equal in creation. Happiness we're chasing, your cutlasses are rusty. Redcoats getting dusty. Shaking in the boots, we're taking out your loots. Running for the hills, riding out the bills. And now we'll set this country free from King George's tyranny. You will not own this spot. US is taking your slot. Raise those flags up on those poles. Show this world we're animals.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you